clear of the closing doors, please.
Welcome to Subway Sports Talk. My name is Peter Kennedy. We're back with Andrew Calagna talking baseball, which, it's over finally. Thank God the MLB season is over for everyone here in New York who had what's the opposite of a luxury, Drew?
I don't know. Just an absolute terrible time. Just an absolute. You ruined steerage.
So, to all of you who had an absolutely terrible time watching New York baseball this year, it's over. And that's the positive. The Mets season's over. The Yankee season's over. The MLB season's over. Playoffs are going to continue on. If you're an MLB fan at large, enjoy that. There are some exciting teams. There are some exciting players. However, here in New York, there was none of that to speak of. It was mostly all negative. And joining me here to talk about those things, we'll sprinkle in the positive or two that exist for both sides, but mostly some sad baseball. And joining me is a happy Andrew Calagna, or is it a sad Andrew Calagna to talk some baseball?
Well, listen, man, I had a lot of gambling losses the last couple of weeks, so I decided to do an audit on myself and it came to the conclusion that I don't have a gambling problem and that I'm going to continue on the path that I'm on. Only down $800.
I see zero flaws in your logic. I don't know if you're making an allusion to something, but I think that logic is perfectly accurate, and you should continue with it. Keep on keeping on. The only real loser is the one who quits.
Exactly.
And, of course, that is actually alluding to the Yankees and their recent news about the so-called audit that they were going to take place that you informed me about before this podcast, where they didn't really exactly get audited and more or less just did some research, but we'll get into that in a little bit. The point of this episode here is once this baseball season officially comes to the end, Andrew Calagna is back. It's been a while since he's been on the podcast. We have to do a wrap up. We have to talk a little bit about this season and what we saw for a good chunk of a season that was just depressing, underwhelming, sad. Pick all the negative words and adjectives that you want to pick, and you can pinpoint them towards both teams at all points of the season. And it's something that we're not used to, especially Yankee fans, right? So even with all the negativity that can exist in the Yankee fan sphere, there's usually that silver lining of, but we still won 94 games and made the playoffs and have a chance. The Mets in recent history have had 1 or 2 years where that silver lining was the same. Yeah, there wasn't all, rainbows and butterflies, but here we are in the playoffs with a chance. Here we are in the wild card game with a chance. Not the case this year. Mets under 500. Yankees only 2 games above 500. And Drew, it was unfortunate. So let me just ask you with an overarching question before we get into our agenda for the day. How are you feeling that this season is now over? Is it pure relief? Is it excitement? What do you got for me?
It's pure relief. On one hand, baseball is my favorite sport, and the Yankees being my favorite television program, I miss them already. But it's one of those things where you kind of need a break. You need to just sit back and self-evaluate and allow to the rest of this terrible season to kind of just wash over you, and just kind of move on and look forward to on how they can improve and try to build on some of the positives, if even there were very few of them during the season. So you kind of reset and then look forward to 2024.
Yeah, it almost feels as if there's reasons to have some sort of excitement on the Mets side, and maybe we'll talk about some of that for the Yankees too. As soon as the season ended, it's almost like
a lot more than on the Mets side than the Yankees side.
Which I want to make sure we remember that this was the same conversation we had last year. Oh, more expectation and more excitement on the Mets side than the Yankees side wasn't the case in 2023, but I hear your point, and we will get to it. But as soon as that season ended, fans are allowed to have hope again. They're allowed to look to the future again, allowed to make assumptions about how good certain players and units on a team can and should be. And that's where the Mets and Yankees are going to get back to. However, they get there from different directions. For me, I always get in this weird space with baseball when the Mets start getting truly out of a race. I was locked in this year. I was watching tons of games. I was watching as much as I possibly could every single night, even if it's in the background. I had the Mets on, and I'm keeping up, and I'm talking about it on this podcast with you and Alec, and we're tweeting about it, and we're all excited about baseball, right? And then the All-Star break hits, and for Mets fans, sure, there's plenty of Mets fans out there who feel similarly to me, where it became very difficult to even care to turn SNY on a Tuesday night. You're on this grind. You have this long portion of the season to go with very little hope, and you don't have players that you're particularly excited about watching. Yes, you can point to some of the positives that we're going to get to in a little bit for good seasons by certain players. You can point to Kodai Senga, but generally speaking, there wasn't a true excitement for a future to watch for the Mets, because you kind of just knew what you had that was good. You knew what you had that was bad, and it didn't draw me to tune in as frequently as I probably should have, but I'm not ashamed to say I wasn't tuning in. And it sounds like you had a little bit different. You tune into the Yankees basically no matter what. Did you feel any of that with the Yankees of like, hey, I know we're not going to be in this playoff race, but X, Y, and Z have me looking at the TV saying, at least I get to watch those guys?
Well, yeah, you would tune into Garrett Cole's starts to, because he's basically going to win the Cy Young this year. And, when Judge came back, you were saying, okay, he missed about a third of the season, but let's see him come back and let's see if we can, run it back and see if we can squeak into a wild card spot. But then it kind of all went downhill in July and August, especially when we hit the trade deadline, when the Yankees did absolutely nothing. And that was, I think that was the real point of the season where I couldn't, I just had that pit in my stomach. I was like, wow, this is truly a lost season, because you could have you could have went in two different directions, and the Mets did the right thing and saw the opportunities and used their financial advantage to get out of Scherzer, which looks like an amazing deal that they were able to get Acuna's brother. He's probably a top 3 prospect now in the Mets system. He's going to be up next year, be able to contribute to the team. And Scherzer's not healthy enough to make, starts for Texas in the postseason right now. It doesn't look like he's not going to be healthy next year. So the good on Mets to be able to avoid that bullet. Unfortunately, they didn't have David Stearns in to kind of convince Verlander to stay, but I think that's fine too. But they made their choice. They got out of those contracts. They got rid of the 40-year-old starting pitchers and made a conscious effort to improve down the line. The Yankees said, "We have our team's our team. We're going to hold on to Harrison Bader, who then they later just put on waivers, and they released him for saved like $800,000 instead of getting a prospect of any kind." It was just like, come on, like that's the movie you're gonna make. And when you say that, Cashman said, "Oh, we're all in on this team." Yeah, you're all in on this terrible team, and you're saying it's not worth adding to. Even though the trade deadline, there weren't a ton of bats to add, but you could have at least tried. And when they didn't try, it was like it sent that message loud and clear. And they try to distract everybody with Jason Dominguez coming up and the kids coming up, and then of course what happens? Jason Dominguez needs Tommy John surgery, blows out his elbow, and he's gone for 9-10 months. And then, typically when position players come back from Tommy John, it takes them a little while to get back. You saw it with Bryce Harper. He had to come back strictly as a DH, and even then he didn't hit as many home runs. It took him 50, 60 games to get his home run stroke back. So, you don't expect Jason Dominguez to be the player you saw probably until 2025. So,
the words 2025 for some reason just really hurt. Yeah. It hit me right in the gut. Like you said 2025, I just like kind of got the chill. I was like, did not like that at all. But you're right. And what fans say all the time when it comes to their teams is, we want you to pick a side. The worst thing you can do is middle. And when we had it might have been actually our last episode. It was one of the most contentious episodes you, Alec, and I had on this podcast. I don't remember if it was the most recent one we did or maybe the one right before that when the season was still in the balance. Mm-hmm. But we were starting to get like into it about what the Yankees are doing, what they should do, what the Mets are doing, how those two things are similar or dissimilar. And we got a little bit heated because I'm like, yeah, you guys are complaining about this and you're complaining about that, but you live in the playoffs and you don't understand what it's like on the other side. And you and Alec are saying, what we need to strip this thing down. It's over. It's time. We need to strip. We need to make moves. And like you guys were doing the other thing. And I think now sitting here after that second half of the season, I more so understand where you guys are coming from, even though I think the caveat is you guys actually had that season where you weren't in the playoffs. This wasn't the typical Yankees down season where you still win 90 games and end up in the playoffs. But like, it makes so much sense to say, Yankees, pick a freaking lane. You can't just roll out the same squad because we now know we have the evidence. We have the proof. If you're a data-driven team, the data should tell you this team doesn't get it done. So pick something else. Go all the way in and just try to win one, and then the next 5 years might be shit, or strip it down and build. Sell pieces off and build. And the Mets did something that I think made Yankee fans jealous, where they took their pieces that weren't doing anything for them this year and got whatever the hell they could. Some of it might be good, sometimes maybe shit. And that's okay because they picked a side. And that frustrates people to no end. Same thing happens with the Giants and the Jets right now in football. Like, there's going to be a point in the season, if they're still, 1-6, 1-7, 1-8 teams, or 2-9, are you going to now try to fight and claw to get to 6 and 13 or whatever? What's the number now? 6 and 11. There you go. 12. I can't do math. It doesn't matter. You know what I'm trying to say. So there's that point in every year for every organization. You have to make a decision. The Knicks have been there a million times. Do you, not the same with the draft in baseball, but do you want to be the team that ends up with the 7th pick and a 30% chance at a franchise player? Or do you want to end up at a top 3 pick with a 65% chance at a franchise player? Again, not one-to-one to baseball, but the same damn concept. And here the Yankees are again with Aaron Boone, with Brian Cashman, rolling it back down the hill to see what the frick's going to happen. But Andrew, we said we'd be positive to start this podcast.
It's just so hard to, but like, there's only so much you could say is, that the Dodgers fence robbed Aaron Judge of possibly going 60 home runs back-to-back season, which I said was going to happen. And if he doesn't run into that, that stadium wall, very possible we're looking at 2 back-to-back 60 home run seasons. There's only so much you could say about Garrett Cole having one of the better seasons in Yankee history. And that's where the positives stop. We said everything you could say. And now, they talked about the audit, the self-audit that they said initially the reports were, we're going to, have a third party, do a full evaluation of us and give us feedback on what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. And then the report come out today. It's no, we're actually going to watch another company and then self-evaluate. So that's how they analyze. Oh, we like how we analyze better. So there's nothing to do here. I wash. It's fine. And once you make personnel decisions, about bringing Aaron Boone back and bringing Sean Casey back before the audit even happens, it was a complete bullshit to begin with. So no self-respected Yankee fan should look at that audit and say, "Oh, they're really gonna turn it around now. They're really gonna self-evaluate. They're really going to be able to figure this thing out together." But you have the same people running, the same people in the room, the same people, the same mindset. Unless the Yankees spend an absolute boatload of money, like video game, never gonna happen type stuff, like they sign Bellinger and Hader and Yamamoto and then trade for Mike Trout, then maybe they can consider themselves World Series contenders next year. But like outside of that, if you go in with the say, oh, we want to see the kids improve again, we want to give them some more run, like there were plenty of kids that looked overmatched in the bigs, and do you really want to go with how they treated Anthony Volpe all year? Volpe probably should have got sent down at numerous points this year, but they gave him 160 games where you ended up with an OPS in the 600s. He had 20 home runs, 20 steals. That's nice. Those are nice counting numbers, but all in all, he didn't have a good year. So are you really going to throw Pereira out in left field? Are you going to have Wells who hit like $160? Like, is that who you're going to just throw out there? So like, there was a point where I said, the kids couldn't be worse, and the kids were some of them were just as bad as Josh Donaldson. Some were just as bad as Aaron Hicks when he was in pinstripe, and it wasn't great that a lot of those guys left and then immediately had success elsewhere, like Hicks, and then Donaldson is the Brewers.
That one must have stung like crazy.
Oh, yeah, no.
Hicks just hitting home runs, it's just. And making plays and having a beard, like as a Yankee fan. If I was a Yankee fan, that would have drove me nuts. It would have drove me nuts. It really would have. We are going to be positive, though, because we have to get those out of the way. There are some things we want to talk about positively for both of these teams, just because you got to check those boxes of things that did go kind of well for these teams in 2023. But all your points are heard by me, and we'll get more into some of that stuff in just a moment. So, Drew, why don't you run past? I know you have a list for both sides here. Some things you kind of went through, jotted down for positives for both sides. And if anything I want to add or critique, I will jump in. But why don't you hit us off with the Yankees positives in 2023?
Yeah, well, so like I was saying before, it's basically Cole and Judge, and that's about it.
All right, let's move on to the Mets positives in 2023.
And so for the Mets, I like.
No, I was kidding.
Like
you can keep talking about the Yankees.
Senga. No, but listen, there's nothing else to say, man. There's really nothing else to say about Judge and Cole. Like again,
so Judge is really good. Cole is really good. Let's move on.
yeah. Like the Yankees wasted the prime years of their career that they're going to regret down the line. Saying, they're basically turned into the Angels of the East. They wasted Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani's prime, and the Yankees have just wasted a year of Judge and Cole's prime here. So they were great. Everybody else stunk. Gleyber Torres was pretty good too. He had a bounce back year for himself, and he positioned himself to possibly stay in the organization long term because he's a free agent after next year. So I don't think they're looking to possibly replace him at second base. So I think he solidified his spot on the roster. Going forward, hopefully he continues that in the next year. But everywhere else, like, oh my goodness, Giancarlo Stanton's so bad. He's so bad. Before you move, I can't. I really hope that the probably the second best thing the Yankees could possibly do this offseason, aside from signing Shohei Ohtani, is getting rid of Giancarlo Stanton, somehow getting out of the last $100 million they owe him in his contract.
Just a few shekels, just a few. Let me ask you this. You probably know because you are a guy who's in tune with stats here. How many people on the Yankees have over 100 OPS plus off the top of your head? Don't look.
Oh, God. Two.
All right. Nailed it. You didn't look that up, right?
No. It's two.
Yeah,
it's Gleyber Torres and Aaron. Gleyber Torres and Aaron Judge.
That is correct. DJ LeMahieu, 96. Anthony Rizzo, 94. Obviously, he missed a bunch of games. And that's about it. You got a few guys on the bench with a 90s rating for OPS plus. Billy McKinney, he only played 48 games. He was supposed to be the guy to save your season at some point in time. That obviously wasn't the case. That was fun while it lasted. So that's pathetic. That's really rough. Only two guys with an OPS plus over the league average of 100. So that tells you all you need to know and why we should probably move on to the Mets positives.
Yeah, it's just there were no positives to be had, and the bullpen was still good. Ian Hamilton had a nice year. Clay Holmes had a good year, but the Yankees can pull a good bullpen out of thin air. So that's just one of their strengths as an organization. So you pat themselves on the back for that, but I would consider that an overly positive, noteworthy thing about the season since they seem to do that every single year.
Fair enough. So let's move on to the Mets. What positives you got on the Metsy side of things?
Yeah, so Kodai Senga was, there were a lot of questions going into the season about, what kind of pitcher is he going to be? And he immediately asserted himself as I think he's going to finish top 3 in the NL Cy Young this year, which is a huge step for the Mets and a big building block going forward. And now, and there were, a few questions about a lot of the kids going in this year. I know Beatty didn't have a good year, but Francisco Alvarez cemented himself as a cornerstone of the Mets lineup going forward. 25 home runs, played incredible defense here. I think he's going to, a lot of the pitchers raved about how he called the game. So I think he really cemented himself. You have a 21-year-old superstar catcher that's ready to be a big building piece going forward. And, along with Nimmo and, Lindor, you have and Alonso if the Mets decide not to trade him this offseason instead of extending him, which would be a huge mistake. You have 5 guys going into next year now that you can legitimately build the lineup around and hopefully have a little more cohesion and a little bit more direction of whatever manager the Mets decide to bring in now, because Buck had a real inkling of just like he did not want to play the kid to the point where Billy Epler had to trade Escobar away for him, so to force him to play Beatty at third base. Like it was that bad, and him playing Vogelback every day. It was just like how long could the leash possibly be for some of these guys where it's very similar to the Yankees. Like, if Donaldson was ever healthy, they were going to run Donaldson out there for 100 plus games, no matter how bad he was. And just like, I didn't get it. I never understood. If you have these prospects here, you got to let them run. If your veteran's going to suck, you might as well let the kids suck, take their wounds, and then hopefully they learn and grow and then make adjustments, because they have actual futures. Eduardo Escobar,
Right.
Dan Vogelback, Josh Donaldson, those guys did not have a future in the organization. It just you need to let the kids play, and down the stretch they did play, and Mauricio looked pretty good from time to time. So there are few positives that you can continue to build on going forward. And again, the Mets actually picking a direction at the trade deadline was, I think, an overall positive. Again, this season going into looking back at the expectations that they had going into the season, was an absolute failure. Of no matter how you slice it, but they position themselves to be able to say, we learned from this mistake. We're not going to just run it back. We're not going to just say, now we're going to have 41-year-old Verlander and 40-year-old Scherzer anchor the rotation and just cross our fingers and hope it gets better. They'll just say, hey, we're going to use the opportunity. And, Steve Cohen did exactly the right thing. What he should be doing is to use his financial advantage to basically buy prospects instead of, and he's going to live with that dead money. And that's exactly what a good owner who wants to win should do. So you have those players plus a positive direction and the addition of Dave Stearns to look forward to for the Mets for 2024. There's a lot of things that are looking bright for the Mets going forward versus what there is to look forward to for the Yankees next year.
Yeah, so that brings us to where we're going to go into now, of what comes next for both of these teams. And just to put a bow in some of those positives, I was never a big Lindor blamer. I've always kind of stuck up for him. I thought the fact that he plays every night and plays good defense and hits for power and drives in runs is something that Mets fans take for granted, right? Like, you look at the shortstop position in the major leagues, and there's just not many impressive hitters. He's one of the top 5 hitters at the position every single year. He was again this year, more or less, give or take 6 or 7 if you want to get particular on what stats you're looking at there. But he gets jobs done. Like, he drives and runs. He plays good defense. He shows up every single day with a good attitude. So I'm always pro Lindor. I think that's obvious. A lot of Mets fans don't, but I think some people came around on that this year. Like, okay, maybe he's not a super duper star, but he is a cornerstone and he is a star. And if this team was built properly, or if Jeff McNeil played to his baseball card and Mark Canha had the same year he had before, all of a sudden Lindor's numbers look even better. So yeah, maybe he's overpaid. Maybe he's not a super duper star, but he is important to this team and he's very, very good. Alonso, to that conversation, let's get that out of the way here. The fact that people don't want to re-sign this guy, it's kind of mind-blowing to me, Drew. I don't understand it. I know there was negativity. I know some people don't think he's the coolest cat in the building. I don't think he is. I think he's corny. I think that there's probably a lot of guys in the MLB who look at him and say, yeah, I'm not like running through a wall for Pete Alonso. And that's okay. He's a freaking awesome hitter. He hits the ball hard all the time. He hits for power all the time. He's been one of the best power hitters in baseball since he joined the MLB. So where am I missing something, Drew? Am I crazy to think it's crazy to not re-sign this guy? He is in line to be one of the greatest Mets of all time. That's not hyperbole. That's not exaggeration. He's that good. He puts up those level of numbers, and the power is something that's a necessity for this lineup. And again, if this lineup was what it should have been, his numbers would look even better. He would drive in more runs, and the guy who we're mad at for not carrying a bad team this year is now going to be a part and one of the leaders of a great team when this team's put together properly. So I think it's crazy. Drew, am I nuts? to think people are nuts that they don't want to bring back Pete Alonso to New York.
Yeah, no, he's absolutely like David Wright level of like Met player, Met cornerstone guy. And again, power is something this team has desperately needed for years. And he's been the only source of power on this team. And he's a guy, he's, again, he's corny, but he does seem like a pretty likable guy. His teammates play hard
And he
for him.
cares.
Yeah, he absolutely cares. He's stuck through so much of this, so much the Will Ponds. He's been there. He's been through all of it, and he still wants to be the kind of the face of the franchise. So, and that's something they desperately need. And that's again, he's not. I wouldn't say he's a top 10 player in the league, but he's definitely top 20. And I think that's, again, if you're gonna draw the line at Pete Alonso, like that's such a bad line to draw that line at. Like, who are you replacing with? Who are you gonna go get? Like, Matt Olson's not available. Like,
right.
If you say you want to go out and get Matt Olson instead, like last year or something like
Where is
that,
it? He doesn't exist.
Yeah, there's not that type of player that's just readily available to step into Pete Alonso, and that you'll have a downgrade in production at first base, and you'll be worse off. So, again, Alonso is what? She's 28 years old. Like, come on. Just, it's not like he's some 32-year-old now about to reach free agency kind of guy. Like, you could sign him to an 8-year deal, and you could still reasonably expect him to put up 35 to 40 home runs every single year for the contract.
Year.
So that's an easy choice for me to say. Pete Alonso definitely needs to stay.
I'm glad you're with me on that one, and we can move off of that, because I really just think people who want to get rid of him just don't have a grasp of what this team should be trying to do. Honestly, like, that's the only way I could say it. Like, if you think that the reason the Mets stink is Pete Alonso, if you think the reason or the way to get better is to move on from him, you're just missing it with this squad and with this player, because he's going to put up numbers for the rest of his career, or at least until he hits the mid-30 mark where people start to really slow down. He's got 5 years left of top-tier baseball. So I'm pro that. Kodai Senga, put a pin in that. It's great to see him put together a full season, continue to strike people out at an incredibly high rate. I know I was probably higher on him than I know Alec was, for sure. It's not like his numbers absolutely blow you away when you look at his numbers, but they're really freaking good. And we were hoping he would be a number 2, number 3 guy in this rotation. He was clearly the best pitcher on the team this year. He probably could be a number 1 or number 2 again next year, depending on what they're able to add. But I think you walk into next year being very comfortable with Kodai Senga at the top portion of your rotation. There's a lot of holes to fill in this team, and we're not going to dive into every single corner of who they need to add and what they can add. We have a whole offseason to do those things. But the David Stearns part of it all is more important for us to talk about quickly before we get to the Yankees and what they need to do or think about or blow up the team. I don't freaking know. So David Stearns is like this hot commodity on the market. He's this guy who went to Harvard, super smart, started working in baseball, worked his way up. He's been working with the Brewers since 2015, he's been the GM of the Brewers, I should say, since 2015. Highly regarded around town. It's been the worst kept secret in baseball that he was going to be courted by the Mets and become one of the Mets leaders in their executive branch. Yeah, for a long time. Seriously, it's been a long time. And they make it happen. He officially becomes the leader of the New York Mets. He's the president of baseball operations, and that's exciting. But personally, Drew, I'm excited, and I don't really even know much about this guy. I've heard many things. I know that a lot of guys at the fan who are more tapped into this stuff than I am rave about David Stearns and couldn't wait for him to be named as a leader of this team. And he's here now. He's a young guy. He is 38 years old.
Ugh.
So, Drew, what do Mets fans need to expect when they're going to see, oh, this bright new guy who's now joined the organization is going to flip the script for the New York Mets? Who is David Stearns, and what's he all about? Why is he such a great signing or great hire for the Mets organization?
Yeah, first of all, he's 38, and I turned 36 in like 2 months, so that just makes me feel really bad about myself. Anyway, but the thing that you should get excited about is that Stearns has an absolute eye for pitching talent. He's the guy who selected a lot of, who was able to build that staff that the Brewers have that's literally the best in baseball. Able to identify Corbin Burns, able to identify all those guys that they have over there in the rotations that, built such a great staff. They're able to coach those guys up and help them make adjustments, because Burns wasn't this highly touted prospect. He got turned into one of the best pitchers in baseball. So you could say, hey, Stearns, maybe you can work some of your magic on McGill, on Peterson, who were atrocious this year. But again, they still had the stuff. If you look at some of the Statcast numbers on those guys, that they still have good raw stuff. It just seemed that they were able to use it in the best way, or whatever analytics that the Mets were using pitching wise didn't seem to be working in their favor. So you have to expect him to be able to come in and help find some hidden gems for the pitching staff and be able to build them up in a way that makes them, probably you can look forward to their rotation being in the top of the league in the very near future. So that's really his calling, David Stearns' calling card, is being able to build, a strong, pitching staff, not just the starting rotation, but the bullpen too. Again, Devin Williams wasn't this highly regarded prospect too, and they were able to adjust some of his pitch selection and be able to kind of turn him into the closer that he is. So should be very excited about that hire and be able to that change in philosophy, and whoever he picks to be manager. It could be Craig Counsell, because he's a free agent at the end of the year. Craig Counsell is highly regarded as one of the best managers in all of baseball. That he could follow Stearns over from Milwaukee over here. So
that was actually gonna be my next question too, with the manager position with Buck going out, and I don't want to do a whole thing on Buck and his shortcomings and his positives from the first year, because it's been talked about ad nauseum. Obviously, he hit the ground running, did a great job in year one, did a really bad job in year two, and it was over, right? It had to be done. And the Mets ripped the Band-Aid off, Buck ripped the Band-Aid off, whatever you want to say. It's over, and they're moving on. So you mentioned Craig Counsell, but I just want to ask a general question. Is there a type of manager, and maybe Craig Counsell is the answer, but is there a type of manager that you see fit for this organization?
Yeah, well, Buck did his job. He brought legitimacy back after the Mickey Callaway, Miguel Rojas years.
Carlos Beltran.
Yeah. So, he brought some legitimacy back to there. He was able to, be that kind of father-like figure. But I think that the players need, and again, Buck's not play the young kids kind of guy. Again, he had to have Eduardo Escobar basically yanked from him, and he was still, forced to play Beatty every day. So I think you need someone who's a little more analytically inclined, but can also relate to the players on a real level. So you have that, Craig Counsell, who was a major leaguer for, I don't know, I think like 15 plus years. So
right.
You have someone who's been there, who has the mind of a player, but also, a pretty good eye for analytics too, at the same time, be able to relate it to the players in a way that's digestible for them. So I think Counsell's the best kind of the match made in heaven for the Mets. Hopefully they can go out and get him.
He's the leader in the clubhouse for now, until he may become the leader in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
See what I did there? All right. So that's the Mets story, really. And again, we'll talk more about specifics of who they can go after and what they need to do in the offseason as we get closer to that point in time. We don't have time for it right now. So let's move on to the Yankees. Let me just ask you this quickly. Were you even shocked at all that Aaron Boone remains the New York Yankees manager? Were you shocked even a little bit, Drew, that he did not get let go?
No, not, because they're just an absolutely unserious organization from top to bottom. The definition, they're like, when the Yankees make little to no moves the offseason and then blame it on injuries and say, if Judge didn't run into the wall, if we didn't misdiagnose Anthony Rizzo's concussion for 3 months, that won't happen again. So, we had bad luck, and, guys got hurt, but we got the kids now, so we're going to play the kids. And this, it's just that the second that report came out, I was like, of course, that's what's going to continue to happen. And Sean Casey, they fired the hitting coach as a desperate move, and then they hit worse under Sean Casey. They
Yeah. Which,
they,
like, look, come on, let's be honest. Hitting coaches in the MLB, yes, they have importance, and I'm not saying that they're nothing and it's a dumb position. But if you think a hitting coach is going to come in and completely change your season, let's be real here. It's about the talent. At one point, the talent is going to show out for better or worse. And Sean Casey does not have a magic wand in the shape of a Louisville Slugger here to flip the script for this Yankees offense. That's just, it's crazy to me. But the word that comes to mind when I hear you talking is just uninspired. There is no inspiration and there's no oomph, there's no gumption in the Yankees organization right now. A team, an organization that was built off of just powerful vibes forever, of being the biggest, baddest team in the league, of we got the guys, we got the horses, come play with us. Right now, they're the team that's saying, okay, maybe in a little while our guys will be ready and we'll be able to compete. It's just a complete flip of the script in the wrong direction for the Yankees, and there's no inspiration for what they're trying to accomplish. Like, the fact that when I asked you that question that you were shocked at all, your first reaction was, like, that's all we need to hear. It's numb. That's what it is for Yankees fans right now. It's numbness to the fact that you have a manager that no one believes in. You have a roster full of holes and old players and young guys who haven't really hit a stride yet. There's not much to turn to from a positive perspective. And this right now, and I won't count them out completely because they have done it before, but this right now looks like a team that's going to be rudderless for at least another year or two. And that's a sad thing to say when we're talking about the premier franchise, or so-called premier franchise in baseball. It's just sad.
and that's the thing. One part of it is, like, it didn't matter who the manager was. Like, Giancarlo Stanton's OPS was under 700 this year. Like, Anthony Rizzo was playing with a concussion. He was hurt. DJ LeMahieu was lost for most of the season, like, just not playing well. And you already punted left. You didn't have a left fielder. You had a rookie shortstop. You went into the season saying we're not going to look to get offense out of the catching position. And Harrison Bader was hurt too. So it was like, what is there a manager to do? On the other hand, Aaron Boone is lauded as this guy, this master communicator, this guy that players relate to, that Aaron Judge said at the end of the day, I love playing for Aaron Boone. He has my back. Like, this is my buddy. And it's just like, none of that's great. I'm happy that Aaron Judge is happy, but it's not translating to wins on the field. And at a certain point, like, the results have to matter. Like, you can only say for so long, our process is good. Our process is just waiting for the results. The results are going to come. The results are going to come. And now you've seen the result of them running it back basically with the same roster that they had last year. And I knew this was going to. I knew the offense was going to be bad. Go replay the season preview episode. I said, This offense stinks. They stink. And they ran it back, and they have to make serious changes at multiple positions on the diamond to even have, a chance of getting into the playoffs next year. Like, certain things could break right. Like, if Aaron Judge stays healthy and Rizzo stays healthy, maybe they sneak into like a third place wild card. And if that's your thing, saying you're just going to cross your fingers and say, hey, we're going to hope for health, and go with the organizational philosophy of just make the playoffs, and it's a crapshoot. It used to be World Series or bust, and now it's just make the playoffs and hope for the best. So it's just a bad organizational philosophy from the top down. And again, unless Hal Steinbrenner seriously opens up the checkbook to Steve Cohen-esque levels, like, the Yankees shouldn't be, in anyone's eyes, considered to be World Series contenders in 2024 or even 2025.
And for the first time in a long time, they may enter an MLB season as like the third or fourth ranked team in an AL East, because the Orioles obviously are that young team with juice. The Rays are the Rays, and the Blue Jays and Red Sox are in the same boat, give or take, right? Like, the Blue Jays have more talent right now. The Red Sox kind of had a poor season, or at least a poor end of the season as well. The Orioles showed up and did the damn thing, and the Rays are the Rays, right? So you're not exactly in a position of power where you're going to look at next season and say, yeah, no, we're expected to win the AL East. You're not going to be. And that's a weird place to be for Yankees fans and the Yankees organization. I don't know what the hell they have to do, because right now, none of the things that you and I can sit here and say they should do are reasonably believed to take place.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem too. All these things that Yankee fans have been clamoring for and people are saying they have to do, you have no reason to believe that they're going to happen. And that puts you in a terribly tough spot to say, yeah, this is it. And also, to make a cross-sport analogy here, which I do frequently, to say that your manager is a guy who's got your back and is your buddy and you like playing for him is not comparable to wins. It reminds me of when LeBron James becomes LeBron GM, Le GM James, right? It never usually ends well when all of a sudden LeBron is getting all his buddies in town, and now all these old guys who he knows for a long time and he trusts them and he likes playing with them are now his teammates. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, same thing. Oh, they're the GMs now. Let's get DeAndre Jordan in Brooklyn. He sucks. What are we doing? Right? It's not typically a positive when players are really happy with somebody or with the guys that they like to be around. No one talks about Greg Popovich or Steve Kerr, or I don't know what the comparison would be from a baseball perspective, from a manager standpoint, but no one talks about these legendary coaches and says, yeah, I just like Steve Kerr as a guy, man. Like he's a good hang. He has my back. Like that's not what people say about these people. They say they push me. They make me work hard. They hold us to a standard. And oh yeah, he's a great guy and I like him. Like that's usually the secondary thing. That's the icing on the cake. When you have a coach that does all the good things and you like him, boom, victory. That's beautiful. But you do not hear about the greatest coaches in all of sports that they're good guys and you like to play for them because you like being around them. You usually hear these guys push us. These guys work harder than anyone in the room. And on top of that, I like them and I'll play hard for them every day. Right? Like that's a very fine line of saying, oh, good guy versus good coach who I happen to like as well. It's a big difference, and Aaron Boone's not on the right side of the coin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think overall the most like disappointing thing about this entire season was like the AL has been more wide open now than it's ever been. Like there's like between the Rays and the Orioles, they have like 3.5 like decent starting pitchers between the two of them. The Astros barely snuck into the playoffs this year. Like if there was ever going to be a year where the Yankees were able to slay that dragon, to be able to go to the World Series, like this was their year to be able to do it. And then they turned it into 82 wins, the worst, the winning streak for the Yankees is still alive, barely. But the worst season they've had since 1992. So I was 5.
And the AL had 3 winning teams in the East, 1 in the Central, and 3 in the West. The National League had 3 winning teams in every division. Yeah. Like that's a huge difference. That's 9 teams that are relevant in playoff with hopeful expectations versus 6 or 7 in the AL. Like that's a pretty big difference in today's day and age with all the teams that make it via wild card and everything.
Yeah, and especially and MLB made it easier for teams to make the playoffs, and the Yankees still couldn't clear that very, very low bar this year. And it's just a lot of things need to change, and a lot of things I don't think are going to. So it's there's a lot of there's points where the Yankees would win like 5 games in a row. I think it was like the beginning of August where they won like 5 or 6 in a row. Like, oh, this is the run, and then they followed up by like losing like 5 or 6 more in a row. And I was just like, okay, like this is you kind of get fooled into thinking, and that like you kind of got fooled in the offseason too. Like, oh, the Yankees are gonna get Rodon, and then Hal Steinbrenner said we're not done yet, but then they were actually done. So, I think Yankees fans are going to be clamoring for a move that ultimately probably is not going to happen. So, you can dream of a lot of things. You could dream of Juan Soto getting traded to the Yankees, but very unlikely that's going to happen. So, you can have this pie in the sky thought, but the reality is it's until proven otherwise, the Yankees are very much a directionless kind of franchise going forward.
That's all I got to say, man. I don't know. I hardly had this much to say. It's been one of those things, and that's why I keep going back to the word uninspiring. It's almost to the point now where in New York, you're not even hearing the outrage and the anger. And that should be the number one sign that something's wrong with the Yankees, honestly. Because all these years where Yankee fans are irate at an end of a season, how dare they bring back Aaron Boone? I can't believe he's still the manager. And there's true anger because there's true expectation. And this year, and again, I asked you because I'm just not, especially in October with football season starting and basketball around the corner, I am not in the weeds of baseball Twitter like I am, 3-4 months ago. I haven't seen the outrage. I haven't seen the Yankee fans saying, I can't believe this organization. What a disgrace. This place, all this negative stuff. And that tells me everything I need to know, because if a Yankee fan is sitting there saying, oh, this happened? Yeah, that's what I expected. This still sucks. Like, that is worse than Yankee fans being pissed off, honestly, because that's almost an admittance of defeat or an admittance of mediocrity that is not where this team needs to be. You need to be either going all in or stripping it all the way down, and they're just flying through the middle, doing nothing. As the great Paul Rudd once said, you got to do more than that. Oh, do less. Nope. Now you're just doing nothing. And forgetting Sarah Marshall, that's where the Yankees are right now. Do more. No, actually do a lot less. Nope. Now you're just doing nothing. That's the Yankees in a nutshell.
Yeah. And I'll give you another, Paul. Right? When someone asks me if I want to talk about baseball anymore, I'll say, no, thanks. I'll have a Minotaur instead.
What is that from? Is that from?
You never saw what was the one with Sean William Scott where they're the big brothers? Or
I can't think.
Oh God!
Why can't I think of the name of that movie now? Oh my God! Look it up, because this is going to be the only positive thing to come out of this podcast, and now I can't think of it. It's going to kill me when you say it.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, great podcasting by us here, huh?
Role models. Yes.
God, I had it on the tip of my tongue. I couldn't get there.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
really
that's
movie.
a
fantastic movie.
If we just talk about Paul Rudd movies, it would be more exciting than talking about the Yankees and Mets right now. That's all we got, Drew. I don't know if you have any last words. Do you got anything to add? I'll say this as my last words while you think of yours. What a place to be in New York sports, where we are now relying on the New York Knicks and New York Rangers. I mean, if you count the Devils and Isles, they're pretty good. But the New York Knicks and New York Rangers are now the ones we have to rely on to have positivity in New York sports, Drew. It's not a good place to be. And as excited as I am for this Knicks season, it makes me nervous that they might be the best team in New York that people truly, truly care about at a widespread margin.
Yeah, the Rangers had a pretty uninspiring offseason themselves, and haven't really looked too great in the preseason too. So not really, their coaching change that they made in the offseason too. Wasn't really inspiring either. But my last thoughts again, this baseball season was pretty miserable. I'm going to try to enjoy the playoffs, but I will miss baseball while it's gone. I'll try to enjoy the playoffs and, pick the Dodgers and root for them to win the World Series, because that's who the Yankees should try to model their franchise off of. So, and plus they got Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and a bunch of likable guys. So I'll be rooting for the Dodgers this postseason. So go Dodgers.
There you go. And you get to enjoy the MLB postseason as a unpartial viewer, which could be more enjoyable for you instead of being miserable about the Yankees. So. All right. Mets and Yankees wrap up. Put a pin in it. Put a fork in them. They're done. Thank God they're done. It was a long haul through the end of summer and September, but we made it to the other side. And now, at least maybe some of us fans are able to have some hope again for our New York Mets and New York Yankees. So we will do more as the hot stove kicks off, or as I like to call it, the lukewarm microwavable dish that is the MLB offseason occasionally. We'll talk about it. We'll do some more on the Mets manager when they make that decision, and as well as free agent targets and trades and et cetera. But right now, it's still football season. Basketball season's around the block. Hopefully you enjoyed that interview with Joel Cohen, writer from The Simpsons and author of a new football book with Dan Patrick. That was a great time talking to him. That's all we got, though, Drew. And if you didn't see that, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll say this. If you didn't see the interview with Joel Cohen, go watch that. It's really fun. Talked about The Simpsons, talked about writing, talked about football, joked about the Jets, talked about Dan Patrick. talked about the writer strike. We had a lot of great stuff, and we had a lot of fun with Joel Cohen. So if you didn't see that on YouTube, go check that video out. It's separate. But on the podcast, if you got here, you either skipped him or you already listened to it. So I guess thanks for either one you chose there, for being here at this point of the episode. So that's all we got. Andrew Calagna, one of our designated hitters, back talking baseball. We'll talk to you soon, Drew. It was good chatting. Oh, that's all we got. Subway Sports Talk. I'm Pete Kennedy. Cheers.
See ya.